Let me welcome you all on behalf of President Riggs and the committee that has put together this week-long series of events celebrating the 20th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. I want to put in a plug for my dear friend Ralph Cavaliere and also Dave Hartman this afternoon at 3 o'clock, I think, in Science Center 200. They're going to be holding forth informally and talking about the old days. And I know Ralph and I came to Gettysburg at the same time, so we're talking about really old days. All right, but that'll be fun. So I hope you can get over to that event at 3 o'clock. I'm not going to say a whole lot about the biographies of each one of our speakers, and I think maybe they will get into it a little bit themselves. I do want to make an observation, though, very quickly, and then I will shut up. It seems to me, and I was thinking about this a bit yesterday as I've been through these various programs this week, it seems to me that all of us have a shared set of disabilities, impairments, if you will. Some of them are very obvious, some of them afflict eyes, some of them afflict hearing, voice, physical movement. Those are the obvious ones, but others affect our mental capacities, our intellect, our emotions. And so to that extent, all of us are in the same boat. And it seems to me that a mark of a mature individual, a mark of a mature society, indeed a mature college, is one that recognizes these impairments and accommodates them with a very positive spirit. And I think that is the goal of what we are doing today and what we have been doing this week and beyond. So I welcome you, I'm glad you're here, and I'm especially delighted to welcome our panelists who have been very good to come sometimes at great distance to be with us today. I'm going to start by asking our student, who is a junior, Patrick Saley. He's a junior history major, and he is in the Gettysburg College marching band. And I'm going to ask Patrick to speak first. And I do that simply because, as I said to him a moment ago, when I was his age, I used to get very nervous about these things. And so we'll get him first and get it over with so that he can relax. Patrick, please. Right there.
Okay. Wow. Hello, everyone. My name is Patrick Saley. Yeah, the little biography for me was not very long because I never actually met anyone. That's my personal mistake. But anyways, I'm actually double majoring in history and sociology. And like you said, I'm a member of the Bullets marching band where I am in the drum line. Also, I do symphony band and percussion ensemble, which is technically where I would normally be right about now. And I'm also on the radio station WZBT 91.1, where I host a show every Sunday night from 8 to 9 called The Generic Hour, in case you're interested in listening. And I also serve on that as the executive program director. So that's one of the many things I do. I try and keep pretty involved on student life on campus, and there's a lot more I hope to be doing. Anyways, since this is Americans with Disabilities Act, and I'm an American with a disability, I guess it makes sense I'm speaking here. It's 20 years anniversary. Coincidentally enough, I also happen to be 20, so it looks like I was born around the right amount at the right time. Anyways, I'm not going to sit up here and tell you that my life has not necessarily been easy or has been necessarily really been difficult. It has been a challenge, but it's a challenge that I think we've been able to overcome through a variety of means. I'd like to thank, of course, my parents who were able to instill in me the values of independence and determination, borderline stubbornness that have been able to help me make it this far through, just all schooling and up through college, especially. Also, I'd like to thank various teachers that have helped me up through my years. Most of them aren't here, obviously, because they're back in Connecticut where they're teaching. And various aides. One woman in particular Mrs. Linda Steller helped me much through my high school years, getting the equipment I needed, training I needed just to be able to function normally in an everyday society. So I'd like to thank her for that. Also, a huge influence on me has been my grandfather on my mother's side, Mr. Ralph Dingy, who has been a continuous presence in my life, and it's probably one of the main reasons I'm interested in history and so involved in music to this day. But anyways, I guess now I should just sort of talk about just what it's like being visually impaired. My vision is obviously not good. I have no usable vision in my right eye, and very limited vision in my left eye, about 2300 at best. And just to give like a sense of scale for that, say if you're looking at someone, you can generally see their face, recognize facial expressions from a fair amount of distance away. I can only do that from about maybe 3 or 4 feet at best. So it is obviously a challenge I live with, but one I've been able to overcome. Various ways I do this through, I use a device called a closed circuit television, that when you put something underneath it, you're able to magnify it and read things that way. It helps with reading and writing a lot. Also, I use magnification software on my laptop that allows me to obviously magnify things. And also it can read things to me off websites or documents that I need to read for classes. So that's how I do a lot of reading. In fact, it's through audio. Every book I get a chance to read is on audio, and I enjoy reading a lot, which is why I'm a history and sociology major, pretty much. A professor actually asked me, like, oh, you're majoring in those 2 subjects. Do you like reading? And, well, apparently. Let's see. Oh, I forgot to mention, there's another thing. I'm involved in campus. I also formed a band on campus called Ed for Short, where I'm a key songwriter and the keyboardist for. So we practice pretty much every week and enjoy playing at various school functions, such as last semester we had the honor of playing at a senior banquet for the international students, and we got a lot of praise for that, and we had a lot of fun doing that. So, you know, like I said, even though I am disabled, I try and live as much of a normal life as possible. I ski, which most sighted people really can't do. Yeah, and I ride my bike around town, and for long, periods of time, I know people would go up to my mother and like, you can't let him do that, he's fine. And my friend's like, well, he's doing it well enough. So, and he's having fun doing it, so why not let him? And like I said, I just try and live a normal life as possible. And one of the things that actually recently happened is, I'm going to go into marching band now for a little bit, just because Dr. Russell McCutcheon was one of the people that actually recommended me to speak on this panel. He had actually recommended me after I had been recommended and was confirmed to speak at it. So a little late to the game, but you know, the thought still counts. Anyways, currently for band we're doing this thing for doing a competition and for CBS, and where we played a theme song to the Hawaii 5-0, and then we got we're competing for money for that. But CBS is here actually doing a news story on, I think it was Tuesday, and they got word that you know, I'm legally blind in the marching band, and that's something you usually don't find. So then they did this whole lengthy interview with me about it, which was really cool, but then when they actually did the news story, they didn't include any of it. So thanks for that. But I was still in it, but just none of the blind parts. Anyways, I guess a little story about that is just, I guess as many stories go, I'm going to start this one off with the phrase, so this one time at band camp. I say that for comedic value, not because it actually started at band camp, it actually started before band camp, and this is actually so important because it's about how I first showed up at Gettysburg. One of the key reasons I actually came here was because of the marching band. I did it all through high school and I loved it. But in high school I did what was called pit, or fun ensemble, where you play xylophone, you didn't march. And actually, usually marching was kind of just a running joke in the band, like, oh, you can't see what, this is hilarious, him marching. But anyways, when I was, the summer before I came here, I had signed up for pit and was looking forward to it, but then I got a call one day from a girl, Elise Stang, who's now a friend of mine. She goes, hi, my name's Elise, and I was the section leader for pit, but this year we're not going to have it because we don't have many members. Do you mind that we're going to be transferred to drumline? I go, well, see, I'm actually blind. Well, legally speaking, but this may be difficult for me marching. But, so I'm like, okay, well, this is something else I'm going to learn how to do. I'm going to march in a field ensemble. I've never done that before, but I'm going to take it as it comes. And, you know, I made it to camp. I started learning basics and doing all that stuff. I remember actually speaking with Dr. McCutcheon at some point, going, hey, I because of my impairment, it's really difficult, and if you notice there's anything I could maybe do to help me improve at this, he goes, you know, you're actually marching better than a fair amount of people on the field anyways. Oh, that's good. How much time have I been speaking for about? Oh, okay, well then that's about time. Okay, well thank you very much, and that's sort of what it's like being a student who has an impairment at Gettysburg College.
Patrick, thank you for sharing. Those of us who know anything about Dave Hartman try to draw as close to him as we possibly can. And unfortunately, I never had him in class, so I can't claim that, but I do have one Dave Hartman story, which I will share with you very quickly. Homer Wood and I went to a football game at Gettysburg College years ago with Dave Hartman. And so during the game, of course, we were trying to describe as best we could what was actually happening on the field. Try that sometime. The great lesson that I took away from that experience was that football is really a stupid sport. You're not missing much, Dave. Dave Hartman.
Well, I can't tell you how exciting it is to be back at Gettysburg, to be able to see Ralph Cavaliere and Alex Rowland, Bill Jones, Ken Mott, and all of you. It's just wonderful to be here. And what I'd like to say is that Gettysburg, you have made a wonderful career possible for me. Before laws for Americans with Disability Acts were even conceived of, Gettysburg stood up to the plate and reached out to me and made me a medical student. You have given me an opportunity to proceed with a medical career, which I cherish very deeply. You know, the laws are very important, and I do not disagree with pursuing these laws. I think they're critical, but the attitudinal changes are what we need to proceed with. We need to look at ways in which to convince people around Gettysburg and other schools that disabilities are minor things. I feel that one of the things I learned here at Gettysburg was that in working with accommodations, working with others to learn, not only helped me gain where I was moving, but also helped students around me. I'll never forget a very close friend of mine, Don Johnson, who worked with me in anatomy. And Don used to say, Dave, it just takes so long to teach you, but as a result, I've been able to get good grades myself. And so I think in the interaction between Don and I, we were able to accomplish a lot. Don also suffered through organic chemistry with me. I'm sure I never would have survived organic chemistry without Don. He was an incredible saint. Unfortunately, Don went on to become a dentist and passed away a few years after that. But he was an incredible man, also one of the reasons why I was able to get into medical school. In medical school, I went to Temple University School of Medicine in Philadelphia. And while I was there was an embryology professor who developed these models that were sort of moving models. He would show how if you blew up a balloon would move, pushing other balloons aside, illustrating how in embryology organs would develop, and as they increased in size, they would move other organs aside. And in this way, our bodies were being developed. And as you understood the development and the movement within the fetus, you could understand where different organs existed. So this creative way of using balloons and blowing them up was an amazing way that helped me learn, but also helped all other students learn as well. And again, my main point that I'd like to share with you is that as we all work together to help each other with our own handicaps, we can all move forward and we can all gain so much. And again, I say thank you to Gettysburg for teaching me so much and teaching everyone so much about accommodations and working together, even before ADA laws came out. Thank you.
Thank you, David. John Sutton was my student. He was one of the very first students I had, and he has gone on to great success as an attorney in Miami, Florida, and I'm happy to accept almost full responsibility for the success that he's had. He's had an absolutely dramatic, upsetting, significant series of events affect his life in recent years. They will be the subject of a special, as I understand it, on NBC Dateline. Is that correct, John?
Correct.
On October 8th, so stay tuned. But we're asking John today to speak with us, and we're delighted that he is here.
Thank you very much. Ken is only 39, and so he was -2 when he was a professor. A little background. I went to high school outside of Reading, Pennsylvania, in Wyomissing. In those years, I had good eyesight, although I was diagnosed with severe crossed eyes at the time of my birth. I played ice hockey in high school. I was on Bob Smith's swim team here at Gettysburg. The swim team came in and helped me after my injury, and they were of huge benefit to my catastrophic injury problem. I graduated from Gettysburg, and before doing so, around March of '69, as I was coming back from seeing a girlfriend at Hood College, I hit a snowman on Route 15, and when I got back and found my mail and it said University of Miami, it seemed like a really great idea to head very far south and not buy more snow tires. Graduated from University of Miami Law School in 1972, 24 years old, and I'm a civil trial lawyer. I've been a board certified civil trial lawyer since 1985, meaning I try mostly commercial or personal injury cases, although I sometimes dabble in criminal law. Since my injury, I have tried 3 jury trials, one of which was hugely catastrophic with a quadriplegia injury and a building that collapsed. The case took 11 years and is ultimately settled in the Florida Supreme Court with, happily, a catastrophic recovery. I had excellent eyesight through my 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and at age 56, on August 22nd, 2004, we had a home invasion. My wife was shot and murdered, died instantly. I was shot 6 times, twice in the head, once in the left hand, left shoulder, right thumb, and right forearm. Got up and slowly walked away from it while calling for 911 on the telephone. And the telephone 911 call, which is going to be aired at Whitensville in an hour or so. I reported my condition, spelling my name and my address. And I had a rough recovery, but I, for some reason, thought somebody was trying to kill me and wanted to get out of the hospital. So I got out in about 25 days and decided, well, I had a choice. I had nothing against Oprah, but I could sit around and listen to Oprah for the next 20 years or so. Or I could try to go back and do something. So probably by October 1st, I started going back to the office very slowly. I lost 40 pounds, which was a good thing. I had virtually no eyesight, as I do now have virtually no eyesight. A little light and dark, that's about it. And I slowly learned things such as dialing the telephone, typing on a system called JAWS, listening to documents on a system called Kurzweil, and gradually learning my way around. In the same house, so I know where the walls and things are. I'm on the water, which is somewhat problematic. I put a railing around the water so that I don't go off the dock anymore by mistake. I did snow ski before my entry, and an organization called Foresight in Vail, Colorado invited me to give it another shot, which I did. Only hit one tree and one skier, and recovered very nicely from that. For the unusual reason of this case, which has been a feature of local and national television, and was tried between June 28 and July 21st of 2010, in other words, just 60 days ago. My wife and my adopted son was convicted of first-degree murder, attempted premeditated first-degree murder, felony murder, and burglary, and was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences. I emphasize that there's nothing that offends me as far as the question, because homicide, the state attorney's office, the public defender's office, 22 hours of deposition, and then the real tough stuff came when in came Dateline in 48 hours. They were on me like a blanket. And there will be the show, which I'm told is going to occur on October 8th, barring legal impediments, and also a 48-hour show. Talking now to the issue of disability, I had none until that particular date. I'd written an article in the magazine, Gettysburg magazine, I believe it's called The Last Word. And when you're in school, and of course I can't see out there, and I understand there's 5 or 10 of you in the audience, which is complimentary. When you are in school and you are sitting next to someone, or when you are in a public place, you never know who you're sitting next to. You just don't know. When we were in college, those that I swam with, we were lucky to have driver's licenses. Lucky to keep them, for that matter. But one of my good friends is a board-certified orthopedic surgeon. Another is general counsel for Rolex. Another sitting in the office is a CPA. You don't know the intellectual capacity and the motivation of those around you. Well, I got back to work and eventually got to try jury trials again, which is tough because I have to memorize things. So I think there's a word for it, but I memorize the first letter of a new paragraph or a new topic. For example, G for Gettysburg, D for Dateline. I haven't done that. Frankly, I haven't really prepared this speech. But what I can say is that 2 things. I think the Americans with Disabilities Act was a good thing. However, there is some abuse of it. The second part of that is that each person, and some here have, such as Patrick and Dr. Hartman, have probably learned to live with this and deal with this much better than I have. And one of my, shall I say, focus points is that I like to do stuff by myself. So if I have a choice between, and I had some fun yesterday morning, Bob Smith, who was alumni director and also a swim coach here, he likes to help me an awful lot. Hey, come on, here, put your hand on my shoulder, come on. Yeah, now here's steps, 1, 2, 3. Well, I figured that out around kindergarten, 1, 2, 3, okay? So I decided to have some fun yesterday morning. And he said, now watch out for those steps, okay? And my girlfriend put a little barrier on top of the steps. So I laid down the steps with my head down and my feet up as though I had fallen down the steps. And I stood on the floor like this, and oh! Pat Smith comes running out. She says, oh, John, what happened? I just had to start laughing immediately. So I have a friend who's a neurosurgeon who's still doing very effective, good brain surgery at age 82. One of the things I learned from him long before my injury was that with serious back injuries, sometimes using a walker when you can use a cane, or a cane when you can do it by yourself, or using one of those big back support corset things to keep your back straight is a crutch. So if you can get around using crutches. Now, certainly you need a ramp if someone is a quadriplegic. And I have, in the past 5 to 7 years, I believe represented 5 quadriplegics, which means they have no use of their arms and legs. The initial impact of my injury was so great that I was ready with the blindness to trade with a quad. I now have learned to be effective enough in getting around that I wouldn't trade with a quad at this point. The trial that I went through was tough, but I was comfortable in a courtroom and comfortable dealing with the vision. I can focus on the reaction of others because I cannot see facial expressions at all. I can't see faces or bodies or anything. It's truly a learning experience. So while the Americans with Disabilities Act has good things, such as disabled parking, which Kathy, my girlfriend, refers to as executive parking, it's pretty handy on occasion if I've got a briefcase and a suitcase and I'm in a hurry, and I do stumble over things and occasionally walk into walls. But one of the things that those around me have learned is that wait for the person, if it's blindness or whatever, wait for the person to request some assistance. Because sometimes offering is a little pervasive, and persistent offering is sometimes featured as, oh, I feel so sorry for you, oh, it's so bad. Well, I'd rather walk into a wall than have persistent help all the time. Now, Dateline filmed me. For some stupid reason, I said, you know, if I could get my eyesight back, I'd swim from Miami to Bimini in the Bahamas. So they picked up on that, and they said, okay, well, we got some good news and bad news. We filmed your daughter in New York, and she did a great job with Keith Morrison. Now's the bad news. What's that? We need you diving in a pool, doing racing dives and swimming laps. Oh, geez. We did that, and got out. It was hot down there at this time of year, toweled off, and they go, well, we made a mistake. The camera wasn't on. We've got to get back in and put the scuba diver back in the pool on the bottom. What a stupid thing. At any rate, it is a thrill to come back to Gettysburg. And I will say that those groups and organizations that you're part of, whether it's a swim team or whether it's a lacrosse team or whether it's marching band or no matter what it is, those people, sometimes you lose contact with them for 20 years. Dan Healy, who I swam with, I didn't talk to him for 20 years. And we weren't mad at each other. He had 3 kids, I had 2. We were busy. Coach, as I keep referring to him, had a retirement party and brought us all together. And then they all came together to help me tremendously. Jim Schemmel, who's in the office, Jim Schemmel, who's in the ballroom here, Dan Healy, Fred Anthony, they've all been just a great help. So that's basically my story, and if there is any question to answer after Kim here is done, do not be concerned about asking me anything whatsoever, because it's not going to matter at this point. There's nothing worse you can ask me than what I've been through, which really was to some extent good in that I was getting it over. I got it off my chest, I got past it, and here I am.
John. We're going to conclude the formal part of the program with some comments from our legal counsel, the college's legal counsel, dealing with compliance by the college to the ADA. Kim Colonna is a practicing attorney in Harrisburg with the firm of McNeese, Wallace, and Merrick. Kim.
Thank you. I just want to say first thanks to the college for inviting me to participate on this panel. It is certainly my honor to be up here with Dave, Patrick, and John, and I can promise you that I will be the least engaging speaker that you'll hear this afternoon, but I'll keep it brief. I actually thought that it might be good to just spend a very few minutes just talking about some of the features of the Americans with Disabilities Act that are not necessarily so well understood, and talk a little bit about how those have a practical effect, for example, on this campus. But before I jump into that, I will say that it's been my personal impression that the leaders of our country are not always the leaders in the situations like the Americans with Disabilities Act. I think that what happens a lot is that society looks around and says, this is not right. We need to help make things more accessible. We need to make the best facilities that we can for people who have disabilities, so that, for example, like John said, he can do as much as he can on his own. And I think that that sentiment started long before 1990, when the Americans with Disabilities Act was enacted. But I do think that the Americans with Disabilities Act helps those of us who may not have been so focused on that issue, or may have been more resistant to that issue, to really focus on it. So a couple quick points on the ADA. First of all, I'm not sure everyone understands this, but actually the ADA has 3 parts. There's Title I, which deals with employment. There are tons and tons and tons of cases out there where lawyers represented employees and employers and had litigation about what accommodations need to be made for employees by their employers. And I mean, there are probably literally thousands of cases on that topic. The second part of the ADA is Title II. It's about public services, and essentially that requires your governments, state, federal, local, to make their services accessible as much as possible. And then the third part is Title III, and if you're from Gettysburg, Title III is really the issue that has been in your newspapers and in your opinion pages, your editorial articles, those kind of things. Title III is the public accommodations part of the statute, and it simply says that public accommodations, and that phrase is very, very broadly defined, should be made accessible to the extent that it is readily achievable. So essentially, your downtown store owners have a legal obligation to make their buildings accessible to the extent it's readily achievable. Unfortunately, there are not hundreds or thousands of cases explaining that part of the ADA like there are for employment cases. So it makes it a lot harder when you're a business owner to figure out exactly what is required. If I'm a business owner that only sells $300 or $400 worth of inventory a week, do I need to have an elevator? Probably not. Do I need to put in a ramp at my front door? Probably so. Do I need to change my door from a manually opened door to an automatically opened door? I can't answer that question because that falls in more of the gray area. I think at the college we've actually done our best to try to go through the campus and identify issues. Where should the accessible parking spaces be located? Where should curb cuts, your sidewalk ramps, where should they be located? Do we need more signage to help people find the door that's accessible to those who have mobility impairments? Do we need to move the signage that has the Braille lettering up to the right height? And that height has changed over the years. So that a person who's visually impaired knows where to try to find that sign so they can push the elevator buttons, et cetera, et cetera. One thing that I just figured out this morning, and maybe I shouldn't admit this, but it was new to me, was that if you've noticed that there are elevator buttons now that the main floor is marked with a star. I always thought that was for people like me who get in the elevator and then cannot remember if I got in on G or 1 or 2 or L or M or whatever it is. But actually that's actually in the ADA regulations. It says that the main floor has to have a raised star that is tactile, that you can feel on those elevator buttons. So I think a lot of us encounter the practical effect of the ADA in our everyday lives. And as a lawyer who has to drag lots of paper up and down the streets of Harrisburg to the courthouse and back, I'm thrilled that we have curb cuts because I can put all that stuff in a rolling bag and off I go. But of course, those kind of challenges are a lot easier for me to handle than for other people. I'm trying to think if there was anything else I should just tell you that I think might be misperceived about the ADA. Oh yes, I remember. Historical buildings. I don't know if anyone in Gettysburg has any interest in historical buildings. I'm just kidding. And I'll try to make this as simple as possible. And again, there are not hundreds or thousands or even dozens, really, of cases that lawyers can read and then give good advice based upon. This area just doesn't end up getting litigated a lot. And frankly, even if it did, every building is so unique, the architecture is so different, I'm not sure how much you could learn from one case to another. So often these cases get resolved. We figure out a good plan, what makes sense, and usually the case gets resolved. But historical buildings, and I swear this will be the end of my little talk, there's a couple of things to remember. One is there is no exception in the ADA for historical buildings. There just isn't. So if you have a historical building that is open to the public, and therefore is a public accommodation, it's subject to the ADA, and you have to do what's readily achievable. Now there is a process in the ADA, which is not terribly clear, where you can actually go to your federal or state government and prove to them that the ADA change, be it a ramp or an elevator or the change in a door, will affect the historic nature of the property so much that you should get an exception. But that is the burden of the business owner. That is not something that is automatic in the law. So regardless of whether you're modifying your historic building or if it's the same condition that it was in 1865, you still have an obligation to make the building accessible to the extent it's readily achievable. So just because it's a historic building is not the end of the analysis. There's a lot of issues that have to be resolved in order to figure out what the obligations are. So thank you very much, and as everyone on the panel has indicated, happy to take questions.
Thank you, Kim. It's your turn. Let's have at it. Comments, questions? Don't be shy. Yes?
I have a question for the doctors. What type of aids were available to him as a student in grammar school, high school, and college?
And you got to remember, this was a year or so ago. When I was in, I lost my sight at 8, and I went to a school for the blind for 5 years, and there I was able to learn Braille. I was able to listen to books on a record. They were called talking books, and learned to use a cane. At age 13, I went to a public school. We had what was called an itinerant teacher who moved from school to school and assisted us as individual blind people in that public school with getting taped books, getting Braille books, making sure we learned our way around. And then when I came to Gettysburg, I used reel-to-reel tape. Do any of you remember reel-to-reel tapes? There must be some people here that do. But reel-to-reel tapes were very exciting to me because I would study for an exam, probably a biology exam, and as I was studying it, all my notes were on this reel. And one reel was turning quite comfortably. Unbeknownst to me, the other one had stopped. And I ended up with all my notes in a little bird's nest. And I remember walking down Paul Hall. Is Paul Hall still here? I was walking down Paul Hall making various four-letter utterances. Some of you probably don't know what that is, but we were very vocal. It was about 2 in the morning trying to get that tape straightened out. So in essence, I really relied on students, and there was a number of students that were very, very helpful reading to me. I'll never forget one of the students that came over to my room, and I sat in my room waiting. It was about 9 at night. He said he would be there, and he never showed up. And I came the next day and grabbed him. I said, "Tom, what happened?" He says, "Well, I came over, but you weren't home." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, there were no lights." But the students were wonderful, and I was quite blessed in college having a lot of support students.
Thank you. Who's next?
I actually have 2 questions.
Go ahead. Marty.
My first is, there's a lot of debate about preferences as to whether or not to be referred to as an individual with a visual impairment, so as to use person-first terminology, or to say, I'm a blind person. I'm just wondering what each of your preferences are. I'll start with that.
I actually prefer the term illegally cited.
I haven't learned this or a lot of things too well because I've been focusing on figuring out how to work. But I normally say I have a vision issue, and they usually figure it out pretty fast.
You know, I personally find that what frustrates me is sometimes people get so wrapped up in the verbiage and what they're saying that it distracts from where you're headed. And, you know, sometimes I'll come out and say, well, it's nice to see you. And they say, what do you mean? I thought you were blind. You know, it sort of loses the whole focus. So I really don't care what people call me blind, visually impaired. You know, I think we need to just move on past that, probably the way the rest of you feel.
Yes.
I have a question, primarily for John, the rest of the field program. Having been at Gettysburg as a sighted student and now coming back as a person with a visual issue, how accessible do you find the campus?
To me, access isn't that big an issue because if the elevators are too slow in the courthouse, I walk. I would say that for my purposes, it's rather accessible. The first thing I think of in accessibility is steps. The issue is knowing when they're there. Now these cuts, as Kim was mentioning in the sidewalk, I think those are important for a lot of reasons. Wheelchairs, I also find them helpful, not because I can't walk up the steps, but if I'm with somebody that doesn't know me very well and they forget, which sometimes happens, and I will put my hand, I'll put my hand on a shoulder like this, and what my daughter does, which is pretty good, is she'll, when she gets to a step, she'll go like this. And that alerts me. Or Kathy, my girlfriend, will stop, and that alerts me. But I have had a couple of little incidents over some curves. One of the biggest things for me is overall navigation. So let's assume I were here. I would probably be memorizing how to get from, say, here to Gladfelder. Now, I remember it, but I don't remember it that well to know exactly where the sidewalks are. So an issue for somebody that's blind, to me, with my full ability to walk and so on, would be where's the edge of the sidewalk. So if I can tell, for example, if I'm walking in my front yard and I have a paved, brick paver driveway, I find my way by finding the edge of the grass in the driveway. And then I find where the cut is in to get to the door. So, sorry, I've been all over the place. I find it to be pretty accessible here. I don't find a lot of impediments.
Yes, wait a minute.
Hi, this is for John. As a parent, I'm a parent, and how did you overcome, I would think there would be so much heartbreak about what your son brought upon you, and how do you move forward with that? How do you repurpose your life and make it positive moving forward with all the tragic things that have happened?
That form of question has been asked in many ways, and as part of the murder case, my deposition was taken for 22 hours, and people have asked that form of question. And when did I realize I was blind? When did I realize my son did it, and so on? Initially, I was so obliterated. I was just, I'm told that my head was out like this. 2 shots into my right temple and out my left jaw. I didn't eat for perhaps 50 days. I had a trach. So mentally, I lost, at that time, a lot of executive function and the ability to analyze. Now, you could give me one project, one issue, and I could write a letter, or I could focus on, say, a particular issue. One of which, let's say, workers' comp immunity in Florida, referred to Quero versus Rhode Island, 849 Southern 2nd, 326, decision, 2nd District Court of Appeal, March of 2003. I could focus in on that. But knowing about my bank accounts and so on, so I didn't know. The answer is I just did not deal with it. The arrests were not until March 16 of 2005, some 6 months later. That was a big shock. That was big, big, big. Now, I didn't react to it, but that was huge. And then the shooter was arrested, and there was then a lag period till April 8 until my son was taken into custody and was running loose. So my friends were all around me, some of whom were heavily armed, and that was also an issue. But I really, and this relates, it relates to what Dr. Hartman has gone through in getting through medical school and college. And what it relates to, I gave a speech at Escape Inside Research Institute, two of which researchers came out of Gettysburg College, Drs. Stryline. I gave a speech there, and I said, well, I may not be MD or PhDs, and I was a poli-sci major. However, I've got a lot of motivation, and I'll match it with anybody. So I just realized I had to look forward and move forward and work in a effective manner. Now, did I have slowdowns and delays and hesitations and anxiety and aggravation? You bet, all the time. My assistant driver guy, he gets lost on me, and he comes late, and I'm sure that Dr. Hartman went through that stuff here on occasion, as he explained. But you just have to move on and get past it. That's it. And there's no sense in sitting there and thinking about, well, gee, this is so terrible. What am I going to do now? You just got to use your abilities to the best of your ability to move forward.
Folks, we have run through our time. I want to thank you for coming out, and I especially want to thank our panel for sharing their stories. I think that we would all agree that it has contributed to our understanding and to our sensitivity. Thank you again.